I'm Tom Burton, co-host, which I have a hard time saying, Brandon Lee and Carson Heady. Carson, it is awesome to see you back here.
Thanks. I've had some things happen in my personal and professional life, and I'm glad I have great co-hosts that have patience for me. So glad to be back.
And we have an amazing guest today, Jeff Winter. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks for having me here. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we have quite a broad set of things that we're going to cover today. And if you're online, definitely let us know that you're here. We had all kinds of weird LinkedIn problems yesterday. So we're hoping that all of those LinkedIn just sort of decided it was going to change the date and time. Bob, welcome. Good. We know somebody's here.
Somebody's here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Carson, could you make a call?
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I was actually going to try to preemptively say, like, hey, somebody should call somebody.
Yeah.
Well, that somebody is you. So yeah, we've had the last 2 weeks where we set our event for 3:30 Eastern on Wednesdays. And last week, I think it got automatically changed to 1 a.m. on Tuesday.
Yeah.
We weren't there to go live, but
Yeah, I was wondering why I was getting urgent calls in the middle of the night.
That's what it was. So, hey, before we get into Jeff and your background and really your amazing journey of how you have built some thought leadership and personal brand, Carson, you were just mentioning you've had a kind of a new role at Microsoft, and you were saying yesterday it's been a bit of a reboot, right, on everything you've been doing with social selling. So I think everybody would love to hear what you're doing and kind of, where you're starting and where you're going.
Yeah, well, this is the age of the reboot, right? I mean, they're rebooting Frasier, they're rebooting all the James Bond movies, so I guess it's time for me to reboot as well. And I'm excited to have Jeff here. I've known Jeff for years, think very, very highly of him. I've learned a ton from him, so I'm ecstatic we were able to land him today. And I pay close attention, if you're out in the audience today, to Jeff's story, because he's going to share some things that will really resonate, that are actionable, that you can do right now, that will have a dramatic impact on your career and on your social selling acumen. But briefly about my update. So as of October 1, I became the lead for our America's Growth team at Microsoft for Tech for Social Impact. So in essence, our team supports over 400 nonprofits in the Americas. And some great names in that. I mean, household names that that I've known for years. The dollars that we earn as part of that cloud growth, which these customers qualify for very special pricing and resources, but they go to fuel Microsoft's philanthropic efforts. So it's just, it's kind of one of those pinch me dreaming moments where, I get to do what I love doing, which is building sales teams. And right now we're kind of building our social selling engine from scratch, but it serves the greater good. So really ecstatic about the update.
There's a good podcast you should probably listen to if you're starting out on your social selling journey.
Well, you know what? I heard of this one called Social Selling for Newbies, and I was listening to the first couple episodes, and those guys were a little bit out of their depth. Too many dad jokes.
Yeah. And they have some weird schedules. You might have to get up at a weird time, but other than that, it's well worth listening to. So
I heard.
You both called it Social Selling for Newbies.
Did I call it for newbies too?
Yeah.
Well, it was newbies in the beginning.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
And Carson's a newbie, so he's going to go back and listen to some of those again and start from scratch. So, well, we'll definitely be interested in kind of tracking the journey as it goes along. And is this a brand new organization, or is this something that you took over from somebody else?
That's a great question. So it's been around for a little bit, and they've made some changes. As we often try to pivot to meet our customers where they are, we've continued to change our verticals. So this America's Growth team is relatively new, but the players are not. And so it's a new role for me, and gives me the chance to step in and do what I enjoy doing with an established team and some established customers. So.
Well, and it certainly seems like, the whole area of what you're doing and the purpose behind it will be great for social selling strategy. Really.
No doubt about it. And really, I'm taking a lot of things that I've learned over the years. Some of the things Jeff is going to talk about today about, even becoming a thought leader in your industry, taking a lot of cues that I've learned over the years in order to infuse that into this new role. And it's working already. Here we are 11 days in, and we're getting some meetings, setting up events. I set up an event today that got 200 registrations in an hour, basically just off of that were out there in our marketing engines. So it's pretty cool and it's fun.
Awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Well, Jeff,
very happy for you, Carson.
Yeah, congratulations. That does sound like a wonderful job, an opportunity, and very different, right? Very different than the traditional sales role.
Much.
So,
and, Jeff and Carson, you guys didn't tell us it was Purple Shirt Day. I feel left out. I mean, you guys.
Well, it was at 1 a.m. It was at 1 a.m. and I just kept wearing it. So
Jeff and Carson have been hanging around waiting for us to start since 1 a.m.
That's it.
So
that's it.
All right. Well, Jeff, thanks for putting up with us so far. Really great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your background, your journey, and then, we're going to dig into kind of how you have really created that personal brand and how you're using thought leadership. And I know you have a lot of really detailed insights to share with us. So kind of start with your background, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I have kind of an interesting background that's kind of weaved around, and it's shaped kind of who I am and what I do today as a part of it. So if you go all the way back, I went to school at Purdue for electrical engineering technology. I was a techie. I learned how to program PLCs, which help machinery operate. And then for the next 7 years after I graduated, I was in various different sales engineering roles for industrial automation companies, helping manufacturers, improve their production processes. I actually got plucked out of sales and put into marketing because of the way that the president at the time really liked the way I was explaining things. And it ended up being my first exposure to marketing, to the importance of storytelling, messaging, and simple communications at kind of a broader level. Then I went and worked for a system integrator for about 8.5 years. I started as a sales manager there and ended up making a pitch to the owners to why we should be in a new area for our company. Is because of what I previously did. I had all the stats, the reasoning why, put together business justification. He goes, great. Why don't you lead it as like a little mini company inside the company? So I got plucked out of sales, put into operations, and having engineers working for me as a sales guy. So that was my first real moment of how do I get engineers to respect and listen to a sales guy? So that was my first thought of, I need to learn something that they don't know. I'm not going to duplicate what they know. They've got years under their belt ahead of me. They're going to walk circles around me. And that's my first start of a journey at thought leadership. I'm going to learn things differently out there that can inspire and excite, especially my audience being my engineers that work for me, to go, wow, we never thought of that stuff. You're helping to shape how we think about a particular subject. So yes, I went out and joined associations. I joined standards. I did things that the engineers weren't doing so that I could become credible on the subject without duplicating their technical knowledge. And the subject at the time was safety. All right. So completely different than what I know now. And I ended up becoming a well-known person in the safety industry. I spoke, 100 times. I won multiple awards. And what I found out is the owner didn't really necessarily care a lot about safety, particularly. Just he liked how I turned this little business unit around a subject. And I created thought leadership as a way of driving business and boosting brand awareness. And just, he liked kind of that overall approach. And then what he said, you want to move up? Now I'm paraphrasing here. You want to move up? 2 things. Learn this new big nebulous subject called Industry 4.0, which in December of 2018, I'd never heard of. No idea what it was. And the second is prove that you can build other little Jeff Winters to do what you do in this thought leadership category. So now I had to reapply it, build a brand new brand on a subject that I didn't know what it was in January of 2019. And I had to processize thought leadership and a few other things so that I could teach it to others to, have others of me, if you want to call it, doing the same thing. That has been a big part of leading to where I'm at today. Now, that was around January 2019. So I had to learn a whole new subject, and I was able to become credible and valuable in a shorter amount of time because I've already done this before. But then the pandemic happened, and that changed everything for me. And it was in January 2021 that I decided I need to make a very concerted effort to be active in the digital world, because everyone was meeting everyone virtually. Anything that everyone ever experienced of each other was virtual, but people still want to network. They want to learn. They want all this communication capabilities with other people. And so my thought was, whoever kind of figures out LinkedIn is going to win this game. And so I made a very concerted effort on LinkedIn. And the main reason why I thought at the time is I go, well, everyone's working from home and no one in terms of a company really cares if you're playing on LinkedIn, and people feel better playing on LinkedIn than they would YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and some companies don't allow that also. So I made a very concerted effort to be active on LinkedIn. Now then, job situations changed. I actually joined Microsoft kind of during this transition. I was actually in a sales support role there. And that's kind of when I started to really grow my LinkedIn journey to support my thought leadership, to promote it to the world. That's how I met Carson. I was actually recommended to talk to him because I was looking for who are the people who are really good at this? Who are the people that I can learn from, latch on to? And so we hit it off right away. We complemented each other. We learned from each other and kind of both grew together in kind of different areas and different categories. And that just absolutely, completely took off and changed the direction of my career personally and professionally. So that's kind of the journey. I'm happy to get into more if you want later, but that's kind of like the history of how I got to where I am today. And now I'm one of the top thought leaders in the world on that subject, Industry 4.0, which I didn't even know what it was in January 2023. I'm one of the top people in the world. So kind of a cool journey.
I love this. And I want to jump in because, yeah, so to Jeff's point, we connected while he was at Microsoft. And when we first talked, I remember Jeff sharing some hard stats that were very specific to kind of where he was, where he had come from, and where he was going from a LinkedIn and from a thought leadership perspective. And when I say that he was able to cultivate a following and establish that online credibility as well relatively quickly, we talk on the show all the time about building that brand, building that presence, making sure you're mixing a variety of different posts. I mean, to watch Jeff's journey and to even see like his daily posts, I go out, I've rung the bell on Jeff. So like I get notified every time Jeff makes a post. And not only is he posting these, interesting, provocative questions, he engages with pictures, but his posts are very conversational. People are engaging constantly with him. It's, in my mind, it's what everybody would want from a brand and from an engagement perspective. Jeff, I'd love to hear some of the things that you've tried, learned, and done as you've kind of grown that journey, and any hard stats you can share, like, how quickly you were able to get up to X number of followers. I think our audience will really relish that.
Sure. Well, I can start with a little bit kind of, some of those numbers and stats to kind of put it in perspective and frame it right. Then we can talk about the learnings and the best practices and things that I do today to help continue to make me successful in arguably less time than I did when I first started off. So in 2020, so by January 2021, when I started this, I would say I was an average LinkedIn user. I had, and I know this number, 871 followers at the time. I probably logged in once a week. If you wish me happy birthday, it took me like 4 months to get back to you. I used it here and there. I had for the entire the entire year of 2020, I had a whopping 16,700 views on all of my posts for the year. So that's kind of where I was at, roughly 350 profile views, about 300 likes, kind of those numbers. I made a very concerted effort in 2021, which I'm going to call the learning year, to figure it out. And so we can go over the learnings, and then I call 2022 the growth year, and I'm still kind of in the growth year because I'm doing a lot of the same stuff. But by the end of 2021, I had 13,000 followers. And I had roughly 1.9 million views. So I went from roughly 17,000 to 1.9 million views in that time frame. 13,000. I actually joined Microsoft in, it would have been October, I believe, of 2021. So it would have been probably around 11,000 followers. And I joined Microsoft when I originally met Carson. It was probably around that 13,000 mark. Then by the end of 2022, I was at 41,000 followers and hit 11.5 million views last year, my growth year, if you want to call it. So 11.5. It is, let's say, October of this year. I'm at 81,700 followers, and I am at, if I look at my numbers now, 20.6 million views with 161,000 likes, 28,000 comments, 10,100 shares. So it completely took off, and now I get recruited all the time to speak with customers from a sales side, to speak at events, helps with brand awareness, brand engagement, helps with me personally, just in all varieties. So that's kind of like the stats, I would say. And I end up winning 13 industry awards last 12 months, being top of the industry for my particular fields. I would argue I probably would have barely won any of those if I wasn't as active on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So that's the stats. I don't know if you had any more you wanted to chat about there. I can talk about the learnings.
That's perfect. Yeah, I would love to parlay that into, what you learned when, and I'm always fascinated too by the stuff that you maybe tried that maybe didn't work or that you tweaked a little bit. Because here's the thing, I think anybody listening, they believe social selling, that there's some value there. But where I think sometimes we stumble and fall is we'll try something, then it's like, I don't know that I've got time for this. You stuck with it. You knew that this would work, and you invested in it and in yourself for the long haul. And now you're reaping the reward here a few years later.
Yes. And the thing I would say to anyone who is aspiring or interested in this is you can absolutely do this. And I would argue you can do it faster than me for two reasons. One, I didn't know my subject when I started this journey. So if you even know something about whatever it is you do, you're already ahead of me. So I had to learn the subject in addition to the promotional aspect. The second is I didn't really have someone giving me advice or coaching on kind of this journey. I was just self-learning and reaching out to people and experimenting on my own. So just having some of this guidance can be helpful. And on my LinkedIn page, if you look at it, I actually do have a little, I think it's like 27-page guide I put together. It goes over my statistics, my best practices, and the strategy, of which I'll go over a little bit more in detail and some tips and tricks today. But that's the thing that I would challenge people to go. So I went from, in 2.5 years I ended up becoming #1 in Microsoft during my time there using LinkedIn as well. That's a short amount of time to go from not using to, that high ranking. So from that, the things I kind of learned on the journey. So first year, one of the biggest learnings I used first year, which I teach people now, is, and you probably heard this a lot, consistency matters more than anything. If you have 1 hour a week to spend on LinkedIn, spend 10 minutes a day. Don't spend 1 hour on Monday and then don't log in for every day. Same amount of time, broken up differently. Carve it out. Make time for it because of two reasons. One, it will get you in the habit, and habits are hard to break and they're also hard to form. Number two is all social media rewards consistency. So you never see viral posts from one-time posters. No, they posted 100 times and then the 101th went viral. I didn't have my first post go viral until 2023. So that means I was almost 2 years into it before I arguably had my first, what I consider to be, viral post, but I stuck with it. Now, just to put perspective, I'm a mega user. I use it. I make my own graphics. I make my own content. I'm not even going to encourage everyone to do that. And I'm 1 hour a day, 7 to 8 in the morning. And I have a set routine that I do in that time. You accept your connections. You send your new connections. You comment on people's posts, and then you decide what you want to do if you're going to make a post during that time. And it's very consistent. Now, the one thing I want to encourage, as I'm going to diverge in two topics here, is there's a difference between personal branding and social selling, or what I like to call social networking, because I view it as social networking is this big, social selling is this big. The main difference between the two, and this will help you getting you thinking about it differently, personal branding is all the public-facing stuff. Your profile, your comments, your posts. And comments are the one that most people don't realize the value. Your social networking or social selling is all the private stuff. That's messaging. That's connection request. All the stuff that no one can see. You put those together, you're going to get very, very well known amongst the right audience that you're targeting with what you're doing. So I'll see if you have any questions there before we can go into lots of different things on what I do during my daily routine or different tips and tricks, either for thought leadership or for LinkedIn.
I have a couple questions, and then Brandon, I'd like you to dig in a little bit more on the commenting side as well. But Jeff, before we came on, and I think this is we were talking about your focus, right? You're saying you're keeping yourself focused on Industry 4.0. You're not diluting your message all over the place. That really hit me, right? Because I think that takes a discipline. It probably takes a discipline as you get bigger and get more followers. Is that something that you decided you were going to do and have that focus when you started, or did you learn that as you went along that, hey, I get a lot better results if I keep that focus and that discipline on?
Definitely learned that as I went along. So I
Okay.
started with Industry 4.0, and then I realized, you know what, there are a few more subjects I want to be known for that are related and peripherally attached to it. So today I have 5: Industry 4.0, digital transformation, AI, IoT, and manufacturing. Now you could argue those are all interrelated on purpose. It's not like I have totally different things, like basketball and, Industry 4.0 that have no connection at all. But so when I start with your personal brand, I always recommend you identify your subjects you want to know. Those are my 5. The second is, what skills do you want to be good at? Those are things that you showcase, but you never actually talk about. So for example, for me, strategy formulation, public speaking, message creation, those are skills that I would argue I have, but I don't talk about them. I talk about these other subjects and those show through. So for a salesperson, this is where I challenge people. You may want sales to be your knowledge, which means you talk about sales management, sales processes, social selling, challenger sales, spin selling, Miller Hyman, all that stuff. Or it could be a skill. I hit 110% of quota. Those are entirely different brands that you portray depending on if you want to be a knowledge or a skill or neither. In my case, I've been in sales most of my life, but selling is in neither of them. So it's a way that you want to portray to the world the brand that you want.
So you're, just to repeat that, looking at kind of your 5 core thought leadership areas, and then also looking at your 5 key skills and looking at how those go together, and is it an and situation where you really want to identify both of them, or does it matter if it's either one
I
or the
view it
other?
more as a mental exercise to give you focus so you don't derail into different
Okay.
subjects. You don't talk about the wrong thing to the wrong people at the wrong time. What gives me focus is having a good handle on what I want my skills to be and what I want my knowledge to be. It helps me know, let's just use the topic of Industry 4.0. I could talk about a million different things within that one topic, but no, I want to be seen a specific way, even within that topic. No one comes out reaching out to me for IoT architecture because I'm not an architect. I'm not portraying to be an architect, even though IoT is absolutely one of my main subjects.
Okay.
They do come to me for IoT strategy, statistics, trends, insights, best practices. So it's around shaping what it is that you're wanting to portray. And if you are in sales, this is something, is I would argue everyone is knowledgeable on something. You can choose to be, do I want to be knowledgeable in the activities you do for your work, or in the thing that you're selling, or in the industry that you're selling to? So you can decide. It could be a product, it could be a field, it could be a discipline, a technology, whatever you think will help you in your personal and professional careers.
No, it makes great sense.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think a question we get asked a lot with your content is, how do you approach that? I mean, you talked about your 5 thought leaderships, and then I heard you say things about storytelling and your public speaking. How do you approach, and then therefore, how do you create content or your comments from that lens?
So it's a great question. And I would say some of this is art, some of this is science. So there's things that I can teach. There's others that just are going to be personality differences and creativity and stylistically different. So here's one thing I challenge, I would say all salespeople do, and why I would recommend getting in the habit of posting. I'm not going to say daily like I do. I try and target 5 days a week, but let's say 3 times a week to start, is because it's going to force you to get in the habit of explaining things simply to an audience. That's a challenge for a lot of people, to go explain digital transformation in 5 sentences. That's going to take 10, 15, 30 minutes just to explain something that short. But once you go through that and you start doing this regularly, you're going to have a whole repertoire of short little elevator pitches, if you want to call it, on a variety of different subjects. I'm ready to go for a lot of panels, interviews, subjects, in front of customers, because I've created all these posts that I've got all these answers put together. Now, here's the other trick I'll say, or strategy more I'd say behind it, is most of my posts, not all of them, most of them are driven by what I do in my daily work life. Let me give you an example. I had to give a keynote presentation at a conference. All right. So I had to spend a lot of time developing that presentation. I had to have pretty graphics made for the PowerPoint. I had to script out what I was going to say. I had to think about the order. I had to come up with examples. If you have all those PowerPoint slides, and every salesperson has PowerPoint slides, you don't even have to make them. Your marketing department could, others could, but you have to think about what to say with them. There's your graphics. And if you already had to think about what you're going to say in it, there's your text. If you actually followed me around, you would see that I will speak at a conference, and then you'll just see some of those slides be my posts, because I literally took the slide and the text and put it in there. And when you do that, you start to go, that's how you're churning out so much content. You're not sitting down every day coming up with something new. No, you're actually sharing a lot, what you're providing for conferences, what you're providing for your superiors in your company because they want answers, or your customers. If you're going to look at some of my posts just next week, they were asked by customers of me. And so I'm like, you know what? I've had more than one person ask me this. I'm going to come up with a simple way to explain it, and I'm going to share it with them as well as my audience. And so that's how you can make it so that you don't spend that much time on this. I don't spend as much time as people think I do on LinkedIn or on thought leadership.
I love that point. That is a super important point. And I was actually mentoring somebody recently that frankly is relatively young in career even, and they're not in sales today, but they want to be. And they have a lot of experiences that would lend credibility and credence to the fact that they would make a good salesperson. And so I started to talk to them about how they could infuse that into what they're conveying from a brand perspective. You know, often we have to, with customers, we earn the right to be their trusted advisor. For a role that you want, you are ultimately working to de-risk that hiring decision and show that based on your experiences that you're able to do these things. But my advice to her was, you have a story to tell. Right. And so what I loved about what Jeff said is we all have that story to tell, whatever vantage point you're coming from. There's something that you have, you're uniquely qualified for, you have superpowers in, or you're an expert in. You're definitely an expert in being yourself. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of value in telling your story to the masses, developing that niche audience, and getting into the habit consistently of conveying that to that audience. Amazing things will happen when you do. A lot of my posts are stories to salespeople about different things that have happened throughout my career, wins, losses, learnings. And those things resonate with sellers and sales leaders. And I've been able to connect with a lot of people meaningfully that way. And even if you're relatively early in career, there's a lot of great value that you can get out of that. I'm going to kick it back to Brandon, and I think we want to take Jason's question out of the chat as well.
I want to add one thing to that real quick, though, because I completely agree with it. The one thing I would talk about just adding in there more specificity around it is one of the things that I do. If you ever learn something in your daily routine that's related to the brand that you want, share it with the world.
Yes.
What most people also don't realize is half the post I have is because I just learned it myself. People think you then have known it for many years. We're like, no, I literally just learned about that 2 hours ago. I thought it was fascinating. So I shared what I learned or what my opinion is on it. And the reason behind it is because I think to myself, if I never knew this or I never heard this, I bet you there are others who don't.
Yeah.
A lot of my posts, a lot of my blogs are things that I have to tell myself or remind myself, or it's an idea that I came up with as I was preparing for my day.
Mm-hmm. And I think for everybody listening, and we've had similar conversations throughout the show, the way I would distill this for everybody is stop overthinking. What do I post? What do I say? Like what I've heard Jeff and Carson just say is they just started sharing what they were learning, what they were observing, what they were feeling about certain topics, questions that they were asked. And I love how you said that, Jeff. It's, if you have superiors asking you for information, you got to create content. You have customers asking you for a question, you have to create content. You have colleagues asking you for information, you're creating content. It's all content. And then we just reuse that. And when we share it, and this is where that authenticity piece comes in. And I think when we say things like be authentic, people's minds go to, oh, I got to share all my personal stuff. No, it's just be authentic with the journey that you're on. And I love, Jeff, that you shared, you started your journey and the rapid increase of your presence and your influence by learning something new and just sharing that journey of what you are learning. I think that's really important for people to understand, because we got people going, I'm new in sales, or I'm just new in this role, or I'm new in this industry. How can I be an expert?
Do you know what my first post was when I started this? What is Industry 4.0? Because I didn't know myself. So when you think about that, and if you look at because I actually have my stats here, January 2021, I had a whopping 2,000 views for the whole month. February, 7,600. So if you look at that, you have to think, I started from nothing just 2.5, almost 3 years ago. That was 2,000 for the whole month. If once again, I mean, last month, just to put perspective, I hit 3.9 million just last month. But that just shows you I stuck with it. I kept at it. I shared what I learned and I got better. One of my other most famous posts my first year was, if AI is so awesome, why isn't everyone using it? Where did that question come from? Because I didn't know the answer. I legitimately thought of it myself. I'm like, I'm curious. I might as well turn this into a post.
Yes.
I love the simplicity of that, Jeff. And for our audience, I hope that's what people take away.
Let's hit a couple of questions here. I think there's some good questions here. We'll start with Jason. He's asking, is it more important to engage on a personal account or build the company brand by engaging with the company profile? I think there's a couple follow-up questions, but let's hit that one first. Jeff, what's your take on that?
So I'm always going to say building your personal brand is beneficial for you as a person as well as for your company. Most people don't fully realize the pull through from that. And I remember having this conversation with one of my previous employers who they had a hard time going, but Jeff, you're not talking about your company at all in any of your posts. You're not talking about the products. You're not talking about the services, the value, anything. It's like, because I'm talking about my knowledge. People want to learn my knowledge, but we actually tracked the company statistics in addition to mine. And the companies went up, the website views, the LinkedIn following, everything went up, even though I never once talked about, not never, but very, very rarely talked about the company. So you're building your personal brand. At the same time, you're helping to support your company, with the asterisks, assuming what you talk about is something your company does. Like I said, if I'm going to be talking about, Michael Jordan, that has nothing to do with at all what my company does. But because Industry 4.0 is something my company has done and does today, it absolutely helps. So I don't know if that's fully answering the question, but building your personal brand helps you, it stays with you, and it helps your company.
Well, and it's going to give more credibility, I believe. You're going to be more credible as an individual than you are by just talking about the company as a general thing. And what I'm hearing you say is kind of the rising tide raises all boats, right? As you get more and more views, more and more followers, more and more interest from your personal brand, it's going to carry over into your company, whether you like it or not. And obviously, if especially if you can get multiple people within an organization doing that, that really, really can rise the overall company brand.
And what's actually interesting about that too, and I would echo Jeff's sentiments, is that there's an element of this that ultimately people are going to gravitate toward people. We get paid often to be the ambassador of a brand, but we are ultimately supposed to be the advocate of customers and the constituents. And so I think that's the key element that we have to embrace. I've been a curator for my company for posts for a long time. I know Jeff was as well. And what we do in these, frankly, often the things that get the most hits are not when I'm talking about my company. They're when I'm talking about culture or leadership or team collaboration or digital transformation or other big topics that people want to know more about. And they seek you out as a person. And ultimately, it is good for the sum of the parts. And frankly, to Jeff's earlier point as well, I get a report quarterly about generated marketing equivalent dollars that come as a result of my posts. And I think that's extremely powerful. So I think there's merit and credence to leaning in on both, a company page and the personal brand element, but they're not always going to intersect. Sometimes they will, sometimes they don't. But the investments that you're making in your personal brand, those are going to pay dividends, whether you're at your current company or not.
And I would argue they never go away. If you spend 6 months, hard at it every day, and then you take a 6-month break, you didn't lose it. You may not be in the algorithm as much, but all the connections that you made, all the content you posted, unless you delete it or take it down, it's all still there. It's all still public. So when you walk away from whatever the situation is, remember, it's never lost. Even if you switch jobs and it's not as applicable, it's never wasted.
Yeah. And one of the things I hear both of you saying that I think is important for everyone to hear is when we're talking about our expertise or our questions, our experiences, the things we've observed and all of that, that's where people resonate and they want to know more. When we start talking about our companies, because we're in this digital traffic jam world where everything, for the most part, it feels it's a pitch. We're being sold. It's a new product. It's a new service. We've all been trained now to ignore those messages. Like we scroll right through them. So when you're creating that type of content they're talking about by sharing experiences, that's what's capturing your customer's interest, not when you talk about your product, but by building your personal brand and sharing that type of content, then they want to talk to you. Then you have an opportunity to talk about your business. But going the other way around is really, really difficult unless they're currently in market searching for it, which we know 95 to 97% of your audience, they're not in market right now. So you got to talk to them where they're at, not where you want them to be.
Yeah, great point. I also want to touch on Bob's comment here, because I think it's probably something that's going through people's head is, you were talking about, Jeff, using content that you've created for presentations and so forth. Is there any issue, and maybe I should go back to the previous one here, is there any issue about IP or anything like that by reusing content for your personal brand that's your company's? Have you ever, or either of you, Carson, ever had anybody say anything about that, or has that ever been an issue?
I've never had this be an issue, but this is where citing your sources or putting logos where appropriate is very important. So, for example, in one of the ones that I use that my company Hitachi Solutions graphic department, made, it happened to be my content that they graphically made it. Hitachi Solutions logo was right on there, so it was the exact replica of what the company had. I wasn't trying to claim it in any other way. And that was the same thing for what I had at Microsoft at the time. I was never claiming something that I didn't make as others. It's fine. In fact, a lot of companies give you the content to go, you can go share this. The thing that I'm going to encourage you to do whenever there's content generated, images, graphics, it could be a chart, it could be whatever it is that you're going to share, add your opinion to it. That's the part that really matters. And no one can take that from you because it's your opinion. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. You can add something to it. And so even if the graphic is made by someone else, I'm going to admit half my graphics are made by other people and they don't have my logo on them. I'm not claiming them. I source it right on there. And so, but all the text is my opinion. That's the thought leadership component rather than just a sharer of stuff.
Yeah, it's like my old college papers. I got to make sure I cite my sources. Now, to Jeff's point, I think that's spot on. I'd say explore, right? If there's some things that you need to do to be, copacetic with your sharing, I would definitely do that. I had a prior role where I had to go through a course to be press ready, and I could do like interviews on behalf of the company. I had another scenario where I went through this training where it showed me like when I'm going to curate a post for the company, I've got to make sure that I cover off on these variables. So I think it just depends on the variables and the parameters that you're operating in. But then to Jeff's point, there are some posts that I make that are on behalf of my company where I make sure that I check all the boxes. And then there's others that I make that have nothing to do with my company and they're completely separate. I won't reuse any content per se, but I may use a slide that I've used internally, right? You've got to use some judgment. I do a lot of sales training internally at my current organization. So I may absolutely use something that I've created that I've presented internally, but at the end of the day, it's technically my IP. So I can use that. I use some discretion there.
Here's some basic guidance I would give to support that. One, if it's already public, it's very safe to share. So if you got it, it's not something that's private. You just got to make sure that you meet copyright requirements there. Second is, if you don't talk about your company or someone else's stuff, you don't really have an issue. Here's a good example. talk about your thoughts on trends on AI. There's no one else's IP anywhere there. These are my 5 predictions for AI for next year, as an example.
Makes sense. And I think Rob, I want to spotlight Rob's question or comment here as well, because I think it's a good summary of what you were just saying. Share the knowledge so people can then pay you for the application and implementation of that knowledge. And I think that's very well stated and very well distilled on a lot of the things that we've been talking about here.
And that can be very broadly interpreted, Rob. That's a very astute comment, because that can be very broadly interpreted. When you're making investments into your personal brand, not only can that attract the attention of customers and partners, but it can also attract the attention of people that recruit you and ultimately become your employer.
It's kind of like the old adage I hear where, a painter paints something in 30 minutes and charges $10,000 for it. And people say, why are you charging me $10,000? They only took you 30 minutes. It took me 40 years and 30 minutes to get that done. Mm-hmm. So to draw an analogy to this, that's where a lot of people go like, Jeff, you're sharing everything you know, like everything. I was like, yeah, but I'm not worried about you being able to take that little thing I learned and somehow just completely displace, the value that I provide. That was a tremendous amount of effort to get to that point. So I'm not worried about it at all.
So Jeff, the title of today's show was how to use AI to augment and automate sales.
I was going to ask, I'm like, are we going to talk about AI? This is a great conversation, but I wanted to hear Jeff about AI.
Well, sure. I feel like we didn't create like a clickbait title or anything. That wasn't the whole idea here. But we got to talking before the show, and it's like, man, we've got to make sure there's just so much value here, Jeff, on your journey. But one of the things that I know you're obviously focused on is Industry 4.0, and you talk a lot about, or you've talked recently about AI, and that's one of your 5 topic points there about automating and augmenting. Just quickly, when you talk about that from a manufacturing standpoint or an Industry 4.0 perspective, what do you mean by the word augment and automate as it relates to that context? And then what we want to do is kind of tie that back. We're going to tie that back a little bit to what does that mean from a sales perspective and a online social selling perspective.
Sure. And this has been a way that, once again, driven by a customer I was talking to that goes, how should I be thinking about AI? And I had to simplify it into an easy, digestible way. And I kind of broke it up and I go, there's really 2 main camps you can think about AI. Because you have to understand AI's intent and purpose, if you will call it. It's like a quest to replicate and improve upon human intelligence. And so when you look at that, it's ultimately making decisions. That is what AI, if you were to boil it down, is doing. So now how you integrate that with you as a human, it can either be used to augment, which means help you, the human, make your decision better, or it can be used to automate, which means it just makes the decision for you. And there are excellent cases where AI can make you better here, or AI can do something you weren't good at or don't want to do over here. In the case of manufacturing, the good example I give here is quality detection. I mean, cameras now with, ML built into their vision capabilities can scan and look at things for defect detection anomalies far more accurately and like 10,000 times faster than a human can. There's no reason to ever put a human in that inspection capability. Augmenting is more to help you with your decisions. And this can be anything from, if in the case of manufacturing, any of your manufacturing related decisions. It could be related to supply chain, production, scheduling. It could be related to how to improve throughput. But when you go to sales, there's a lot of ways that I would argue that AI could help both. If we look at it, and I'm going to think about it, I want to get your guys' take. If you were to break it up between sellers and selling, which includes management and the processes behind it. Like for sellers, augmentation can help with everything from lead prioritization. It can help with personalized communication. For sales management, it can help with things like forecasting, and it can potentially help with training and onboarding, or even it can help with, augment in this case, performance analysis. It can help, everything from recruitment, reporting, a whole bunch of things. When you look at automation, that one's a little bit trickier in the sales process because so much is tied into the human element of everything. But there may be aspects, for example, where you're using it, I'm going to say like with a chatbot where part of the sales process is you have this thing that is designed to replace a human for this one part that's providing value to the customer where they can interface with that. It's making the decisions autonomously without your involvement at all to make your company, your selling process better.
And AI isn't new. That's the thing. Like, we've been leveraging AI technologies for years to do some of the things that Jeff just described, like lead scoring, being able to see, like, based on these activities that are transpiring with this customer, we believe that there's a higher propensity for them to be responsive to this sales play, as an example. We've been using things like that, like chatbots, feeding frequently asked questions documents into these chatbots so that people can interface with them and it can scan these documents very quickly. And to Jeff's point, make a decision, respond back. Now, I think one of the big reasons that it's becoming so prevalent in the mainframe right now is because of things like ChatGPT, how it's being used in order to infuse some thoughts and suggestions into how we can craft emails, how we can very quickly summarize transcripts of meetings and prompt notes for next steps. The capabilities and the powers of it, if I miss a meeting and to know if that meeting is recorded and I can have a report delivered to me saying these are the things that you need to address immediately as a result of that, rather than me having to go back and review the recording, that's extremely powerful. Lastly, and I'd love to hear Brandon and Tom's thoughts, I love Bob's comment, automate the $15 an hour tasks, augment the $100 an hour tasks. I think the key element here is there's always going to be things that as sellers, as professionals that we want to do and we want to lean more into. And if you can leverage technologies like AI in order to take some of these things off your plate or to automate them and make them go quicker or just as effectively, then giving you more time to spend time with your teams, with your customers, et cetera, that's where it has real power and capability.
Yeah, and I really like, and it goes back to what you said, Jeff, because you were answering a question, but I get this question all the time is, where do you start with AI, right? I don't know, where do I start? It's like, and even just looking at things that, okay, what are some things that I could ideally augment in whatever I'm doing? What are some things that I could potentially down the road automate? Those are at least something to start with that you can start moving forward. I do have a specific question for you, Jeff, though, as it relates to augmenting and LinkedIn. Now I don't know if everybody has it, but I now know when I go in to post something on LinkedIn, it comes up with a little AI chat bot and, can you help me create a post for you? What's your take on that, Jeff? Do you think that that's going to add, or how can it add value? How can it accelerate what you're trying to get done, but without it becoming just something that you're trying to automate what you're, getting somebody to automate the post for me versus augmenting what I should be doing on the post?
It was a great example. I use ChatGPT probably 40 or 50 times a day. And a lot of it is to help with exactly this stuff. I'm using it to augment what I'm doing. I'm able to produce more, better, rather than replace what I do. There's a big difference, which is why you never saw any stylistic difference and can't discern the day I started using it and not, because I've gotten very good at using the tool to help me be better at producing more efficiently. So overall more, and then just more efficiently on top of it. So that's an example where if you can be educated and trained on how to take advantage of stuff, it can help dramatically in your ability to capture the thoughts that you have in your mind and create a framework. I always like the adage of, if you're good at ChatGPT, it turns you from a writer into an editor. It's always easier to start with something and change it than it is to start with a blank sheet. I have never taken something literally out of ChatGPT and post it, but I have started with it and go, oh, I like that, but I'm going to change this. It inspired me to think and do something over here, as part of it. But that's a good example where if you can use it and go, I want to convey this point, this point, this point in this order, reference this statistic, and make sure to drill down on this point and put it into a narrative in 150 words. It's pretty good at that.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to feeding the AI too. I mean, it's not just asking AI. And I think that's one of the challenges, Tom. And you go into LinkedIn and it says, you want me to help you make a post? It's like, what are you going to get? It's like you've got an empty brain, sort of, that's going to give you a new post. And it's not empty, obviously. It's got everything all over the internet, but it doesn't know who you are. So using AI in that capacity, And we've been doing a lot of testing and working on this with what are the prompts and what are the guidelines that we give. But in training a stream with AI and feeding it all a bunch of stuff like, what do we talk about? What do we think? What do we do? What have we learned? And then asking it to help write posts, it gets better and better every day. And I like the way you said that, Jeff. It moves us from becoming a writer to an editor.
And
We just did this exercise where we were updating the Fist Bump website, and we hired a copywriter to do some writing for us. And I thought, oh, just for the fun of it, what if I go in and use the stream I've created already around the company and everything we've fed it, and ask ChatGPT to give us some copy. And there was a lot of copy that we pulled from ChatGPT, edited a little bit, that we actually preferred over the human copywriter.
That's pretty
to help with that stylistic side, I was very proud of a post I did last year. I made it an analogy to something that I was proud of myself for. I really liked it. I have that saved in OneNote, ready to go. So I copy it and load it in all the time to ChatGPT and go, take this post as my example, but let's change it with these particular points, so that we could create a similar narrative and style. It was my work. It was just helping to, frame it, this other thing in a different way. And so once again, back to being able to use it correctly. My one advice there, if you're going to use this to help you, don't use ChatGPT to help you with the answers. Use it to help you write the answers. Because if I did that, I'm not going to, any expert will be able to pick apart the stuff that ChatGPT writes, because it's good, it's plausible, it's not great. All right. But it will help you write it. So that's the part that you need to learn. So for example, when I will go, all right, I have 6 types of digital transformation. These are the 6, and my little bullet for what each of them are, turn that into a narrative. Now you're using it to help you write, rather than what are the 6 types of digital transformation. That's different. I don't ask it for answers. I ask it to help me write.
I love that. And to your point, so, ChatGPT will be a great, you can spot the posts and the comments that people post with ChatGPT from a mile away. Attention, LinkedIn community, with all these little pictures and all that jazz. They stick out like a sore thumb. You have to make sure you're massaging what comes back from the algorithm. And to your point, Brandon, the AI doesn't know who we are. Now, if you ask Alexa, who is Carson Heady, I'm working on this. Alexa knows who I am, but ChatGPT doesn't yet. But one day we'll get there. But I think I love Jeff's analogy, because I'll do the exact same thing. And I'll often even take, find your medium that you're good at. I can do a recording. I could literally talk to a recording, record that, take the transcript, feed it into ChatGPT and ask it to translate that, or, take that transcript in my voice and make a post. And now you've got your own words, and I'm comfortable speaking to the camera or speaking to my audience. And I can use that in order to make the post, even though I may not have the time, or I may not have the inclination to go in and type all that out that morning. So play around with it, play around with the prompts. There's a lot that you can learn, but make sure that you're putting your own voice into it.
So Carson, you may not be on ChatGPT, but Mark is using Carson AI.
That's great.
For their business. I mean, this is IBM. IBM is using Carson AI. So
I'm going to look for my royalties. They're probably about as small as my book royalties.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. Jeff, really, really good. I love your tactical, tangible advice. It's really, really helpful. I made a few notes here, more than a few notes actually, along the way. Is there any, as we wrap up here, Jeff, any final thoughts? Like if you were going to tell somebody one thing or something that they should know, if they're trying to sort this out or get started, what's the one sort of thing that you would like to leave everybody with?
I'll give you two things I recommend, very tactical, that you should start doing every day. All right. To help build your brand and help you with sales. Is it one? You need to comment way more than what you're doing right now. But I'm going to give you advice on what to comment and who to comment on.
Brandon loves it.
3 groups of people. 1, CEOs of companies that you want to be known within. Okay. This could be your customers, could be your own company. I commented on Satya Nadella's post all the time. Did Satya ever respond back? No. Do you want to know who follows Satya? All Microsoft employees. Yeah. That's who I was targeting. So now imagine doing that with your company, your customers. Have I ever had the CEO of these major companies respond back? No. But if I'm targeting that customer, their employees see and follow their CEO. Number 2 is influencers. All right. Find the influencers specifically in your particular space. If it's Industry 4.0, I should be one of them, but there should be several of them. It's not about whether I respond back. It's about who my audience is, because people that want to follow Industry 4.0 are following me. You make a comment. I average 93,000 views per post, to put in perspective. If you're the first commenter on my post, that's 93,000 people that could see your comments. That's probably more than you would get if you posted yourself. So think about that. If you don't know what to say, here's what I'm going to say. Don't say thanks for sharing, good post. No one cares. Say something insightful in one sentence. Have ChatGPT help you. I don't care. One sentence, insightful. If you don't know what to say, ask a question. Want to know why? Even if you know the answer, it doesn't even matter. People love responding to questions. And you might get 2, 3, 4, 5 responses to that, which boosts your comment up, which gets you seen more. Even though you know the answer, it can just spark conversation. And then the third is if you have any fans, if you are an active poster and people, regularly do it, comment on theirs as well. That's big. So commenting, do 10 a day. All right. That's what I'm going to say. The other one is use the messaging app. I use the messaging app all the time to people I want to build my brand with. All right. I do it inside of Hitachi Solutions. I do it directly with my customers, directly with Microsoft. Everyone that I work with, I use that as my primary communication tool to the world that I'm trying to build a brand. Here's why. Let me give you an example. Let's say I was in a customer call with a partner and, my company, a partner and the customer. And I said, hey, I'll send you that PDF. I send it in LinkedIn, not in email. Here's why. Let's say I sent it in email. All they have is what they remember of me in the meeting and whatever I said in the email. If I send the exact same message on LinkedIn, unless they turned it off, they're going to get an email that says you got a LinkedIn message. They're still getting it. But now they can click on my profile. 1, I can see if they clicked on my profile. And 2, I just control my brand. I didn't know you worked at Microsoft before this. I didn't know you went to Purdue. I didn't know you're speaking at that conference. I didn't know you're friends with Carson. I just controlled my brand with the exact same approach. Plus, if you send a message on LinkedIn and they respond back, I'm oversimplifying. LinkedIn goes, oh, you're friends. Next time they sign on, I'm going to show your stuff higher up in their feed. So I didn't do more messaging. I just changed my platform they use. Those are my 2 pieces of advice.
And I'm going to say for everybody, not that the previous 54 minutes we've been talking weren't good, but that last little bit there is so practical and tactical that everybody should be doing today. And you can. Yeah. Thanks for that, Jeff. That was fantastic.
Mic drop moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I think this is a good place to end off. Thank you again, Jeff. Amazing. We're going to have you back as your journey continues. Carson, Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off? And Carson, we've missed your sign off for the last couple of weeks. We didn't know what to do. We just stopped.
Well, I mean, that's probably why you thought you were supposed to be on at 1 a.m.
Right.
You didn't know when am I on? When am I off? I just wanted to say this exceeded expectations. I've known Jeff for a few years, and he always delivers the goods. And I appreciate how forthcoming and how much you share as well. I mean, I think it speaks to who you are, but it's also great for the craft. There's plenty of room on LinkedIn for people to rise to the stage of being an influencer, a thought leader, or just being credible in your field. And so, Jeff, you really delivered some things today that I think all of us can put into practice, myself incled. I had some key takeaways that I'm going to do differently as a result of today's show. So thank you.
Absolutely. Hey, Jeff, I do have one question for you. What time do you normally post? Because I want to be your first commenter tomorrow. So I have 96,000 people that see me.
It's 1 a.m. He posts at 1 a.m.
We said it earlier. If you're paying attention, it's 7 to 8 is when he does his activity.
And he does it at the end.
7 to 8 is when I do my time, but I actually usually have my post queued up and ready for a time that I'm available to respond to some of the comments. Sometimes it's 8:30, sometimes it's 9, sometimes it's 1 in the afternoon because I'm traveling, but it's already queued up. But I don't do the auto scheduling for the post. The reason why is I want to be there when people respond right away. I'm not sitting there all day, but right when I post it, I want to be there for the first few to help kind of engage and push it. So I'll be sure tomorrow.
Ring the bell. Ring the bell.
Refresh.
Ring the bell.
Over.
Between 8 and 9 Central tomorrow.
All I'm going to do tomorrow is sit here and go refresh.
I'll see you.
It'll be a productive business day for Brandon, but he's going to get 90,000 views. So.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Carson, take us home.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you all. Thanks, everyone, for joining. And until next time, happy